Our lecture today is going to be on e-commerce and social media. Now, this lecture will be a little bit lighter in nature than some of the others. I want to also prepare you for, we'll have some discussions in class where we'll talk a little bit more about both of these topics. We'll talk about some cases with this. But I want to give you some basic backgrounds about e-commerce and social media, talk a little bit about business models, and then we'll discuss this more in another class session. Before we begin, though, I want to remind you about the web design project. So we'll be having some lab times after this class. We'll have a couple of lab sessions. The sections 1 and 2 will meet in the ARC downstairs as we normally do. Section 3. This is, first of all, we'll have our very, very last, fortunately, time over in Folsom Hall, and then we'll be back in Mendocino Hall. I'll try to send out some reminders about that. After our times in the lab, we will be working, we'll be talking about our social media case discussions like I just mentioned. So please come prepared to discuss those cases. We'll be talking about lots of different cases. There's a bunch of very, very short readings on Top Hat that we'll be discussing. Now, also I recommend for the web design project, please look over things, there's some videos, there's some instructions. You can start working on the web design project and then come to the lab for help. It's a great opportunity to get past any challenges that you have. All right, so let's start off with what is e-commerce. Well, there's another textbook, one that we're not using, that defines e-commerce as the process of buying, selling, transferring, or exchanging products, services, or information via computer networks, including the internet. And I kind of like that definition. I think it's a pretty reasonable one. We're usually talking about buying and selling, but when we think about e-commerce, it's a little bit bigger than that. We're talking about not just products, but services, not just individuals and customers, but businesses to each other and to others. And we'll kind of talk about some of these models. But first of all, take a guess, maybe take 15 seconds and guess, what do you think the very first e-commerce transaction was? Well, if you guessed correctly, it was actually a very early drug deal between Stanford and MIT students over the ARPANET, which is the predecessor to our modern internet. It was being the 70s. It was marijuana. How about this? What was the very first item purchased over the internet using encryption? Now, encryption is something we just take for granted nowadays, that all of our purchases, when we make them with Amazon or eBay or wherever we purchase from, that we're going to be encrypting that transaction, so our credit card our information and things like that are not transmitted, that people can see them. But back in 1994, this was a very rare thing, and the very first internet purchase through encryption was Sting's Summoner Tales, a CD from a company called Netmarket in 1994 that doesn't exist today. Now, how about this? What was the very first item sold on eBay? Well, eBay kind of has this mystique of being built to support the sale of Pez dispensers, but actually it's not the very first item that was sold. The very first item that was sold on eBay was a broken laser pointer. And later on, the guy who bought the broken laser pointer after eBay became large, and he was asked why he bought this laser pointer, and his response was, well, I like laser pointers. So that's the very first item purchased on eBay. How about the very first book sold on Amazon? Most people would think, something very popular like Harry Potter or something like that. It was actually this book, Fluid Concepts and Creative Analogies, Computer Models of the Fundamental Mechanisms of Thought. A book that I'm sure all of you have read, or probably not, actually. It's not a very popular book. It's not very many copies have ever been printed. And it's a great example of how Amazon, especially early Amazon, was able to capture what we call the long tail. We'll talk about that more in a few slides. First of all, let's kind of define organizations and how they interact with e-commerce. So this slide discusses kind of the level of digitization or virtualization of an organization. For example, if an organization is a purely virtual organization, one that is sometimes called a pure play. It is an e-commerce only organization. It has no physical retail stores, and it only has an online presence, and customer interactions are only performed online. Now, historically, we would give Amazon as a great example of a pure play, but Amazon actually recently has started opening up just a couple of physical stores. They have a bookstore in Seattle area, and they've actually announced that they're going to be opening up more stores and more kiosks type presences elsewhere. They also have a trial store that they're working with in Seattle where you don't have to check out. Everything is just scanned as you walk out. So they're not a pure play anymore. There are a few still pure play organizations. Some service companies are pure plays. We'll see more of service in a minute. One that I usually give an example of is Newegg. Newegg, at the time of recording, is still a pure play organization. It's one of the largest companies that sells computer electronics and especially computer components. Same things that we've talked about, like hard drives and video cards and CPUs and things like that. Now, they have a warehouse in California, but they don't have any physical stores. At the bottom of our degree of digitization is we have brick and mortar organizations. So these are those that don't really participate in e-commerce. They might have a website, they might advertise a little bit online, but they don't do any selling online. They have physical stores, one or more physical stores, but most of their customer interaction is face-to-face, other than maybe a little bit of email marketing or some online website marketing. Oftentimes these are becoming more and more rare also, but stores that have kind of fit this mold, many supermarkets fit this mold. They just don't sell items online, although there's some that have started to sell online. For a while there, when I lived in the Midwest, one of them that was popular was there's a hardware store. It's actually the number 3 in this country, called Menards, after Home Depot and Lowe's, and they were a brick and mortar only organization, and they've recently moved again into the same category that Amazon now is, which is the middle category of clicks and mortars, or sometimes bricks and clicks. These terms are a little bit old and dated, but we still use them occasionally. These are organizations that have both physical stores and online e-commerce. And most organizations have moved this way. So, some of them, most of them have moved, like, your Walmarts and Targets and our physical big box stores have moved from brick and mortar organizations to become click and mortar, or bricks and clicks, as they've added e-commerce. And then many of our pure plays, our virtual organizations, like our Amazons, for example, have started adding physical stores or kiosks to become brick and clicks organizations. Now, we can also categorize e-commerce in terms of who is participating in the transaction. Most of the times when we talk about e-commerce, we're really talking about business-to-consumer e-commerce, okay, where the seller is a business and the consumer is purchasing the product. But we can also talk about business-to-business e-commerce, and this is a very large section of e-commerce where businesses sell to other businesses, both goods and services. And occasionally we also talk about C2C e-commerce. And sometimes this is through an intermediary, like an Etsy, for example, is usually considered C2C, although some people consider it B2C, small proprietors. eBay tends to be a consumer to consumer, although there's many businesses also that participate in eBay. And so this is a kind of a less common type of e-commerce, but it still exists. So let's walk through some examples of B2C e-commerce. So we have our very traditional e-commerce, which is a direct sale through some sort of electronic storefront. This is your Neweggs, like we talked about, or your Amazons for their online things. You've got an online store and you go and purchase through them. But then we also have, and this used to be much more common in the early days of e-commerce, we have this concept of electronic malls, and it's a kind of a strange concept that's coming back. So the idea here is that there's a site that is a kind of a portal where you can shop for and view multiple retailers in one place, like you're going to a mall and be able to purchase from multiple different shops in one building. This is sort of started coming back as companies like Amazon, companies like Best Buy, Walmart, through their online shopping, have started allowing other companies to sell through their websites. So you can purchase directly from, for example, Amazon or Best Buy, but you can also purchase additional products or even the same products from other companies through them. And so they're becoming a little bit more like electronic malls. Then we also have direct sales through online marketplaces. We talked about, for example, Etsy. Etsy is really an intermediary. They don't really sell anything, but they allow people and small businesses to sell through them as an electronic marketplaces. And then sometimes online auctions are C2C or B2B, which we'll see in a minute. But eBay is becoming more and more of a business to consumer, even if these are small businesses that are selling to consumers as an auction. We also have services. So the last slide was all about products, mostly. Here we have services. So for example, Ally is an online-only bank that provides services. Esurance provides insurance services. There's E-Trade. Looks like I need to fix that link. Is an online-only securities trading. Monster for job markets. Hipmunk and others for travel services. These are online-only companies, no retail, but they are service companies. Now, one of the things that I like to talk about with e-commerce is kind of the dark side of e-commerce, or sometimes the marketers don't often think of these as dark sides, although sometimes it makes people uncomfortable. So there's kind of fine line between unethical marketing, of course, and actually trying to serve the customer and give them the product mix and customize their offerings for a particular consumer. So we've kind of gotten used to in our modern world direct marketing through electronic advertisements, whether it's pop-ups or pop-unders or text ads or spam or things like that. We've kind of gotten used to those, just like most people got used to television commercials over time. But we also have things like search engine optimization. Now, what do I mean by that? It sometimes goes by the term SEO, search engine optimization. It's the idea of, think for yourself, when is the last time that you searched for something on your favorite search engine, Google or Bing or whatever it happens to be? When's the last time that you clicked to the second page or third page of search results when you're trying to find something? For most people, the vast majority of people, it's almost never is the answer to that question. And so search engine optimization is, how do I get my website to be the top result or top few results, or certainly on the top page of a search engine search? How does that happen? I mean, partially it involves paying the search engines. That's one of the main ways that Google and others make money. But there's other ways that we can try to do that. We can try to change our site and try to game the algorithm that the search engines use to decide which site gets ranked. And so search engine optimization is that process of trying to get your website to show up higher in the search rankings. Behavioral targeting is kind of interesting. So this one, sometimes people get a little bit concerned with. Many don't. Is it okay for people to learn information about you as much as they possibly can and provide targeted advertising to you based off of your behavior and your demographics and your characteristics? Is that okay? If you go to a website, is it okay for you to then visit a different website and see advertisements related to what you previously saw? Well, some people become very uncomfortable with that and consider it kind of a privacy violation, and others think, oh, well, I was kind of interested in this product and they're showing me that advertisement rather than another. Well, maybe that's okay. So that's something that sometimes people become a little uncomfortable, and it's becoming more and more common, of course, in business-to-consumer marketing. Companies like Google, through their arm of DoubleClick and others, know so much information about you and your behavior and where you're at and where you shop and what you like to do that they can target exceptionally well. Facebook does the same thing. This last one, though, tends to make people a little more uncomfortable and is becoming less common because it makes people so uncomfortable. Would it be okay for a company to offer different prices to different consumers based off of their demographics, their gender, their age, their race or ethnicity, where they live? Is that okay? Can two people go and search for the same product online and get different prices? Maybe if they're logged in versus not logged in, whether they've been to the site before or not. Is that okay? For example, Amazon's been criticized of this several years ago. They were, and they don't do this very much anymore. Is it okay for products for women to be more expensive than products for men, even if it's the equivalent product? Many companies have kind of gotten in hot water over that in the last 10 years. Is it okay for retail companies who have lots of different stores to have items in stores in poor areas to be more expensive than in rich areas because poor people have less of an ability to shop around? Is that okay? And so with electronic B2C commerce, there's the ability to, based off of some of the behavioral targeting items, to price things differentially. And that sometimes makes people uncomfortable. And so it's one of the kind of the gray areas of e-commerce. All right, let's talk about this concept of disintermediation. So if you can, kind of imagine a traditional supply chain, we'll talk about this. We've already talked about it a little bit with supply chain management systems, and it'll come up again. So here's our, kind of traditional distribution channel. We have some producer, we have some, middle person wholesaler that then sells to retailers, and then consumers go to the retailers and purchase the products. That's very normal. Well, one of the things that happened with the advent of the internet and e-commerce was this idea of disintermediation, meaning the removal of the middle. So for example, what happens if the producer, now through electronic commerce, can sell directly to the retailers? Well, is the retailer happy? Oftentimes, because they can get better prices. Because in a traditional distribution channel, the producer makes the products and then marks it up and sells it to the wholesaler, who then marks it up, who sells it to the retailer, who then marks it up and sells it to the consumer. And so every step in the process, every quote unquote middleman adds some additional costs. So if the producer is able to sell to the retailers, the producers then can make more money because they're selling at a higher margin. The retailers might have lower costs, so they're making more money. This is good for everyone except for the wholesaler. Similarly, we might intermediate the wholesaler, the retailer, and everyone and sell directly to the consumer. Consumers like this, they get lower prices. Producers like this, they get even higher margins, but it upsets the wholesalers and the retailers and can cause what's called channel conflict as companies get disintermediated, or at least partially disintermediated. They can upset their partners in their distribution channel, and that can cause some problems. Now, over time, we've often seen in certain industries the addition of information intermediaries in some industries. So rather than disintermediation, where we remove the intermediaries, we're adding them. So for example, in the airline ticket industry, it was very common for people to purchase sometimes from their travel agent, but oftentimes directly from, the airline, from American or Pan Am or Delta or, whatever company it was. You'd purchase directly from that company. But then with the advent of the internet, we started to see an explosion of Expedia and Orbitz and Travelocity and others in the airline industry as information intermediaries, so that you could go and shop around through them and they would provide information about the availability and the prices of flights. It was great for the consumers, right? Prices go down, you can shop, quickly shop and get, the flights that have the least amount of layover or the most direct flights, and try to find what's best for you. Now, this is terrible for the airline industries because they have to compete largely on price. And so some of these companies, for example, Southwest and JetBlue, that's why they're on the slide, have actually not allowed these intermediaries to search and to display their flight results. If you want to go to Southwest, you have to, or if you want to purchase from Southwest, you have to go directly through Southwest or JetBlue. A similar thing happened in the jewelry industry, where the jewelry industry was very fragmented, and primarily the jewelers would purchase the the gemstones, the raw gemstones, and then the polished cut gemstones, and then put them in the settings, and then they do all the work there. Blue Nile is the main company, although there's others in this industry now who have also added themselves as intermediaries, where oftentimes people will purchase the gemstones from Blue Nile, which then gets it from the suppliers, and then take them to the jewelers for a setting, kind of adding an intermediary here, which allows the consumers to some extent disintermediate the actual jewelers for part of the process. So it's kind of an interesting industry with the addition of these intermediaries. All right, so let's talk about B2B a little bit. There are a number of B2B marketplaces and exchanges. There's a couple up there. Well, Alibaba is very large, and some of these others kind of go in and out. B2B marketplaces are very important in certain industries and have done very well in some and done very poorly in others. The auto industry is really interesting because for a while there was some exchanges that were doing very well, and then some of them were going out of business and doing very poorly. They're doing okay again now, where we've got this sort of exchanges for parts amongst the auto suppliers. These B2B marketplaces and exchanges, some of them are similar to the just online shopping exchanges that are exist elsewhere. You're similar to your Amazons of the world, for example. But some of them are different. They can use forward auctions, which are very similar to your eBay style auctions, where the prices go up and up and up and up, or reverse auctions. Reverse auctions work like this: a company, a supplier, will say, "Hey, I'm sorry. So let me take that back." A company that wants to purchase a customer will say, "Hey, I want to make an order of 10,000 of these particular items. Here's the specifications." And then the suppliers will be able to bid on that order. And those prices then go down over time as suppliers bid down the price on what they're willing to do it. And then the auction ends, and the supplier who has won the bid, the lowest price, gets to produce the item for the suppliers. So this is kind of an interesting twist on auctions. All right, and then I don't have too much to say more about C2C. C2C is, eBay can be C2C, but it can also be B2C. Etsy can be C2C, although some people are thinking more and more of it as B2C. But it's the idea of consumers selling directly to other consumers through some sort of e-commerce intermediary. Now, why do we care about e-commerce? Well, there's actually benefits to both sides for e-commerce. So, for example, on the seller side, well, your customers become more accessible. You might be a small shop that was traditionally selling in your local region or in your city. Well, now, if you have an online storefront, you can sell nationwide or even potentially internationally, and sell to a wider variety of customers. E-commerce may lower distribution costs. For many, having a retail store and having inventory in that store is very expensive. Having something in a warehouse or doing just-in-time inventory and not having a retail store is much cheaper. Now, on the consumer side, we tend to like e-commerce because we have a wider selection of products. We'll see more on that in just a second. And often this allows us to have cheaper prices because we're not paying for the extra costs of an online storefront. The other thing is, most consumers love shopping in the middle of the night, late at night, in our pajamas, and so we're not limited by traditional business hours, which can be frustrating for many consumers. So here's a concept called the long tail, and it's an important one. I really like this quote by an Amazon employee from way back in 1994. And let me see I'm going to read it once and see if you can understand it, and then we'll talk about it. He's Josh Peterson. He said, "We sold more books today that didn't sell at all yesterday than we sold today of all the books that did sell yesterday." Here's what that means. If you were to think of a book that is super popular, okay, like the most popular, usually if I'm doing this in class, students will come up with Harry Potter books or 50 Shades of Grey or the Bible or whatever it happens to be. Super, super popular books. If you're talking about the most popular books, we could look up on Amazon and figure out what the most popular books were. And if you were to rank those from, the most popular book being on the left side of this chart, and then, the, less and less popular books in order. So this is the popularity rank, the most popular on the left. This sort of blue region in the chart represents the most popular books, the ones that have the highest demand. So this is Twilight at its height, or whatever books are the really popular books now. What stores are carrying those books, the most popular ones? Well, every store that carries books is going to have those. All right, your corner shop, your kiosk at the airport, of course, Amazon's going to carry that. Your Walmarts and Targets, your small bookstore sellers, everyone's going to carry those books. But as we move to the left, as popularity rank goes, the ranking goes down, up, but the demand goes down. As the demand goes down, what stores are now going to start carrying the books that are sort of middle popularity? Well, your bookstores are going to carry those. Maybe your big box stores will carry those, but your small mom and pop stores aren't going to carry those. Your gas stations won't carry those. And as we move further to the right on this graph, then all of a sudden even your big box stores might not carry those. It's only going to be bookstores and now online bookstores. And so as we move into this green area, the green area represents what's called the long tail. So these are less popular items, but there's still a demand for them. So Amazon can sell that crazy fluid dynamics cognition book that has a demand greater than zero, that is never going to be in any reasonable retailer that sells books, except for maybe an esoteric bookstore. But they can still make money off of them by capturing that long tail. So do they capture the on-demand, the super highly demanded books? Of course they do. But they also can capture the less popular books because they don't have to worry about a retail operation. They just have a huge warehouse that has a ton of stuff in it, and if they can sell it for a profit, they can sell it. And so the quote, "We sold more books today that didn't sell at all yesterday," that represents the long tail, less popular books, than we sold of all the books today that did sell yesterday. So they were talking about how this long tail for Amazon, in terms of the total sum, was actually bigger than the blue region, at least in 1994. All right, so that's e-commerce. Let's talk for a few minutes about social media. Most of our social media discussion will be in our in-class session where we'll talk about cases, but let's talk about this basically. Social media can kind of be related to the collaboration technologies that we already talked about, things like email and instant messaging and video conferencing. But it's just different. Social media, the key component is that we have a network and there's some sort of interactions with networks. This is idea of friends or followers. And it's all about the creation and consumption of content with that network. So it's a little different than email and instant messaging, even though there's some sociality and some social network there. But the web-based social media and mobile social media now is really about content creation and sharing and consumption. So if we're talking about social networking websites, as we currently think of them, those that have a profile, the ability to do posting or pinning of some sort, friends, followers, things like that, what is our first social network? Well, as it turns out, most students tend not to know this one. The first one was actually a company called 6 Degrees, based on the concept of 6 degrees of separation. You can look that concept up. And then over time, we see all of these others. There was one called Makeout Club that's essentially gone now. Friendster, you might have heard of, is also essentially gone. Early 2000s, we start to see ones that have stuck around for a while, like LinkedIn and MySpace. MySpace had a huge rise and was very popular. And then, of course, we have Facebook, which has dominated for a while. Eventually we're moving into some of these others, which have taken, some popularity, but aren't as popular. And now we're starting to see, others like Instagram and Snapchat and others kind of becoming more and more popular. And sometimes these bigger companies like Facebook have started to snatch them up. Now, I posted this already. So what's the first Facebook profile? Well, here's what it is. Mark Zuckerberg's profile. It's a little different than profiles are today. What's the first Flickr image? Well, it's this little dog. It was the very first Flickr image. How about the first pin? Well, the first pin is this nice little couple kissing on a bicycle, little silhouette. First YouTube video is actually this, the founder of YouTube at the zoo. I love those really, really long trunks. Really, really long. All right, here's the very first tweet by the founder of Twitter, back when Twitter had no vowels, because vowels were not cool back in the day. Here's the very first tweet from another planet, the Curiosity rover on Mars, which is pretty awesome. And here is the first Instagram picture. Now, this next one isn't really a social media, but if you were curious, the very first image that was ever uploaded was uploaded by the creator of the World Wide Web, the creator of the first browser, Tim Berners-Lee, and it is a picture of a group at CERN in Switzerland, right here, not too far off of some of our current posted pictures. All right, so let's talk about some of these social networking websites. We have different categories. We have sort of the general purpose ones, things like Facebook, MySpace technically still exists, Twitter, Google Plus sort of technically still exists. We have social news websites. Slashdot was an early one that was very, very popular in the tech industry. Then Digg kind of became popular, and over time it's become less popular, and Reddit has kind of become probably the most popular social news website. There's others as well. Social photo and video sharing, we've got Flickr and Instagram and YouTube and others as well. In the professional side, there were others, but LinkedIn has kind of become to dominate the professional side of things. And then, of course, there's location-based ones, and these tend to be a little bit more niche social networking websites. All right, now this picture I like. I don't need to necessarily go through all of it. You can kind of read through, pause the video and read these, but these are kind of a play on how different social media are. For example, Facebook, it's all about liking your cat. Instagram, here's a hipster picture of my cat. LinkedIn, I'm very skilled at training my hats, and so forth. And then this one's kind of an interesting one. This group at Conversation Prism has kind of tried to categorize different social media by whether you're talking about whether this is focused more on HR or branding or community, marketing, etc. And these are quite clever, I think, if you want to look through these. It just shows the overall diversity of different social media. Now, how can companies effectively use social media? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in our discussion next. So we'll hold off on our conversation of that for right now. Last thing I want to talk about is business models. So how do companies make money off of the internet and off of social media and off of e-commerce? So how does Amazon make money? Well, a few different ways. They have some subscriptions, but primarily they also sell cloud services. They've been diversifying a lot lately, but primarily most of Amazon's money comes from selling stuff. So they are just a traditional retailer that takes products, marks them up, and makes money off of that product markup. Again, they make money a few other ways, but primarily it's off of sales of physical products. How does eBay make money? Well, if you've ever sold or bought off of eBay, there's actually transaction fees that the seller pays, and so they make a few percent depending on the volume and the number of factors off of every transaction. How does iTunes make money? Well, they take a cut of every song, every app that's purchased off of there. The numbers have changed a little bit over time. It used to be close to 30% of the sale actually went to iTunes. I think it's changed a bit over time. They make quite a bit of money off of marking up products, in this case, digital products. How does Pandora make money? Well, recently Pandora hasn't been making very much money. They've been struggling. They technically have subscriptions, but by and large, they make money off of advertising. Okay, and Pandora is a music streaming company if you've never used them. How does Facebook make money? Well, Facebook almost exclusively makes money off of advertising. How about Twitter? Well, Twitter again is really struggling right now, and people have been rumored to buy them, but they're not actually buying them. How do they make money? Pretty much off of advertising. And how does Snapchat make money? Well, Snapchat's actually doing very well. They just had their IPO, and they make money off of primarily advertising, but also they've been expanding a little bit. They've moved into sponsored filters and have actually been making quite a bit of money off of that. And they're moving into other markets with their spectacles and augmented reality, but it's primarily advertising as well. All right, so that's all I want to talk about now. We'll talk more about social media after our lab session. So just be aware of the lab sessions. I'll send an email out around that. Then we'll have our in-class on social media cases. And then after that, we'll have an online lecture about the management of MIS after that. So that's coming, in the next 2 weeks. This is where we're going, and I'll send out an announcement about that.